All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Bonnie Abramson. I am the education coordinator for the United Square Dancers of America, and we welcome you to our latest webinar series, part of our Beyond the Dance Floor. This is creating and maintaining a welcoming and safe square dance environment. And as our guest today, we have Mr. Harlan Kerr. Harlan is a longtime, well-experienced caller in all levels of dancing. He's from the San Francisco Bay Area, but has worked all over. He's worked for multiple clubs, and he is the most recent retiring chairman of the CALLERLAB Board of Governors. And so we are very happy to welcome Mr. Harlan Kerr.
It's good to be here. Good morning to you, because I think you're all in California. It's actually 2 o'clock here out on Cape Cod. When I first got involved with the CALLERLAB Board of Governors, one of the very first actions that occurred was at my very first meeting of the Board of Governors. The first item on the agenda had to do with creating a safe and welcoming square dance environment, because over the years we've experienced certain times where not everyone feels welcome or safe in certain situations. Next slide, please. I think you just click either the down arrow or the space bar. There we go. So at that meeting, first entry, at that meeting we discussed what CALLERLAB as an international organization should be doing to promote a safe, secure environment for people to dance in. And after some discussion, next, hit it again, please. We came up with the idea of creating the document that we'll be discussing today to help callers, organizational leaders like yourself, and dancers in providing and supporting a welcoming dance environment where all dancers can enjoy the activity in a safe, nurturing, and pleasant atmosphere. Next slide. So it began with a discussion of the CALLERLAB Code of Ethics. And I pointed out that there was nothing in the Code of Ethics for CALLERLAB that really specified what callers should be doing to create a safe, supportive, and welcoming dance atmosphere. And as a result of that, we got the following item, which was added to the Code of Ethics, and that's item 5. Every caller you run into who is a member of CALLERLAB has to sign off on the Code of Ethics every year when they join CALLERLAB. And there's a list of about 12 items on the Code of Ethics. And the new number 5 that I helped create was to provide a safe, welcoming environment for all. I am, as a caller, committed to providing an environment free from sexual and other forms of harassment, bullying, without bias based on race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, gender, sexual orientation, age, or disability, and is always respectful of the hearts and spirits of others. So every caller who's a member of CALLERLAB signs off on that and is responsible in their work with dancing to help make that happen. Next. And one of the things that came out of that was, okay, if that's the CALLERLAB commitment, what kind of commitment would we like to have clubs make? And after some discussion, we came up with this recommendation for clubs. And it's for people to take back to their clubs and consider how and in what way they might incorporate it into their club leadership. And that is to ask clubs to say that the club organization named above, and you'll see a form for this later on, strives to provide an environment that is safe, secure, and welcoming to all participants. Ideally, all dancers will be comfortable and will enjoy their time in the square dance environment. The club or organization discourages inappropriate behavior and does not tolerate any form of harassment, sexual harassment, discrimination, or bullying of dancers or other attendees at their dance events. Next. The club or organization also respects and is bound by federal, regional, and local legislation that prohibits discrimination or bias based on race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, gender, sexual orientation, age, disability, and laws covering sexual and other harassment. So this is an example we created to provide clubs with for you to consider using. And it goes on to say, this policy applies to all events that the club or organization sponsors. This policy also applies to interactions that take place immediately before and after dance events. This was added because I actually had a couple of dancers say either after the dance event or sometimes before, but usually after the event, I sometimes have things happen as I'm going to my car that make me uncomfortable. And so we added the phrase that it applies to both before and immediately after the event. Next. Members and guests and other participants in the club or organization activities found violating this policy will be sanctioned at the discretion of the governing body. Violations of this policy and instances of concerning behavior shall be reported to the leaders. Serious violations shall be reported to law enforcement personnel if needed. So that kind of sets the context. And after we came up with both the CALLERLAB Code of Ethics statement and model statement for clubs, we looked at actually putting together a handbook. And three of us, Dottie Welch, myself, and Schindler, all worked together on this, and then the Board of Governors adopted it. And so we're going to take a look at what the content of the handbook is, and later on I'm going to show you the handbook, and when we post things after this presentation, you'll be able to download the handbook. Okay, next. So we started out the handbook by kind of giving it context to the dancer. As a square dancer, you participate in a very diverse activity. Your age ranges from youth to seniors. Next. You come from a wide range of social, ethnic, racial, and personal identification groups. You also hold a wide variety of individual beliefs and philosophies. Some square dancing involves a high degree of physical contact and social interaction, so some accidental bumps should be expected. Next. However, and this is the big however, in light of your varied background and social norms, sometimes what other dancers intentionally do or say can make you feel uncomfortable or unsafe or even painful. And that's part of what the handbook describes. This handbook describes behaviors that you can learn to create a safe, secure, and welcoming dance environment for yourself and for those whom with you dance. So the next section, we really looked at, kind of outlining what appropriate behavior is at a dance event. And one is to appreciate the diversity of the group you're dancing with. Know that there is a wide range of people there and respect all the people that are there, and use our common joy in dancing as a basis for appreciating the full range of people who participate in our activity. Expectations. Square dancing is a friendly group activity that involves physical contact on the arms, hands, and shoulders, as well as eye contact while dancing. You should expect occasional touches and bumps that are occasional and fleeting. However, interactions should not make any dancer uncomfortable. Also be aware that behaviors that are considered inappropriate can disrupt the whole dance experience. Okay. Communication. We want dancers to use the defensive dancing techniques described in the next section to communicate your willingness or unwillingness to participate in actions involving close physical contacts or rapid turns. This includes hugs, flourishes, and swings. Social interactions. And we always have to remember that one of the biggest things about square dancing is it's a social activity. Have friendly conversations during break. Be aware that personal space outside of the square exists, and that remember that comfortable chatting distance varies from person to person. Leadership, and this has to do with a lot of the people here. If you are in a leadership role, dancers, as well as callers and club leaders, need to be knowledgeable and vigilant about the issues we'll be discussing here today. Procedures. Also, you need to understand the procedures for identifying inappropriate behavior and addressing the issue, and that we'll be covering later on here. Awareness, and this has to do with recognizing, avoiding behavior and words that are inappropriate or uncomfortable and could offend other dancers. Styling. Styling can be really controversial depending on what group you dance with, the ages of them, and the kind of outlook of the one club to another. And we need to learn styling options that accommodate all couple combinations, whether they're young or older or diverse. Next. Gentle handholds. This is a big one. Use hand and arm turns that can easily be released by either dancer. And this is actually something we encourage callers to teach when they're particularly doing beginner classes. Hold your thumb beside your fingers, are loosely spread and inactive. For calls that with a pull-by action, make sure to let go as you pass shoulders. Do not push. When assisting another dancer, be patient and use gentle pointing or hand beckoning. Next. Okay. The next section of the booklet that we're going to look at later gives definition of what harassment is and inappropriate behaviors. And as individuals, dancers have varying degrees of comfort with physical contact and personal interaction. Some people feel comfortable having close swings. Some people feel very uncomfortable with it. Some people experience pain. So an interaction is appropriate if neither person finds it offensive. And the interaction is based on mutual friendship and respect. So the people involved determine what's inappropriate for them. This section that we're going to cover now defines general behaviors that are not appropriate. Harassment. Harassment is a series of incidents involving unwelcome and hostile verbal, physical, or visual contact directed toward one individual by another, where there is conduct that creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment, causes a member's participation in the activity to suffer, negatively affects a member's opportunity to participate in the events, and specific actions that can be considered harassment are not limited to verbal conduct such as offensive name calling, jokes, slurs, or negative stereotyping, nonverbal conduct such as staring, leering, threatening, intimidating, or hostile acts, physical contact such as assault, unwanted touch, and that's the big one, or intentional interfering, visual conduct such as derogatory or offensive photos, cartoons, drawing, or gestures. Constructive criticism, though, which is provided a lot in square dancing, our teaching is not considered harassment. Bias and discrimination. This is a big thing that was added after a lot of discussion. And bias is mental learning towards or against a thing, a person, or group compared with another, usually in a way that is considered unfair. Commonly, the groups are identified by race or color, ethnicity, national origin, religion, political views, sexual orientation, marital status, age, or disability. Discrimination is action resulting from bias, and it may occur either directly or indirectly. Specific actions resulting from bias and discrimination include, and not limited to, expressing negative stereotypes, making jokes based on bias, publicly refusing social interaction with someone based on bias, sexual harassment is unwanted sexual or sex-based behavior. Specific actions that are considered sexual harassment include, but are not limited to, demanding sexual favors as an implied or overt threat concerning conditions of membership, conduct of a sexual nature that interferes with a member's participation and creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment, uninvited or unnecessary physical contact of a sexual nature. One of the things that became a really big discussion, and it's unfortunate, is that it is actually important for callers and clubs to include defensive dancing in part of their teaching and part of their underlying way of managing things within a club. And defensive dancing, unfortunately, is a case where dancers have to have a few defensive mechanisms where they keep things inviting for themselves, where they keep themselves from being hurt. And so we came up with a list of ways that dancers can decline or avoid unwanted, painful movements. If you're, one of the big things has to do with weave the ring and do-si-do and similar calls. And one of the ways to avoid unpleasant physical interaction that is to either put your hands behind your back if you don't want to do something more involved, or do skirt work, which is becoming less common as we see less skirts. But the most successful thing is to avoid swings or turns while doing weave the ring or do-si-do. Put your hands behind your back, and that can help too. Physical contact. To minimize an unwanted hug, yellow rock, hold up your right hand and to block the hug. And what I've shown my dancers to do, if you don't want to hug someone who's coming at you, put your left arm across your chest and put your right hand up and say high five. And that can prevent you from having to get involved in an unwanted hug. If you are fond of twirling, and some of us are really fond of twirling, and some of us never want to be twirled. If you're fond of twirling or swinging other dancers, please be gentle and be sensitive to the cues that the other dancer gives you. Refrain from vigorous swings, and unless there is a clear communication of enjoyment. Some people will let you know that they enjoy swinging, and others will let you know that they don't. Flourishes. If a dancer approaches you aggressively to force a flourish, make an X with your arms in front of you, or hold your arms over your chest to minimize physical contact. And another way to decline flourishes, like a swing, is to keep your hands busy with other things. And those will help discourage unwanted physical contact. Handholds. Handholds are probably one of the biggest things in square dancing. I had a dancer last week come up to me after a tip and say, look at my wrist. And she had a bruise on her wrist. And she said, that's because so-and-so was holding my hand so tightly. If a dancer holds your hand too tightly or too long, there's a number of things you can do. You can give a gentle, lighthearted reminder, such as grimacing and holding your hand away and shaking it out. Or the most easy way and direct way is say, please don't squeeze, please let go. If the dancer persists in being too rough, ask a club leader to speak to the dancer about their roughness. And that's a complaint I have commonly. Okay. The other thing is also just keep in the back of your mind that most dancers do not generally intend to make other dancers feel uncomfortable. So when telling people not to swing too hard or telling someone not to hold hands too hard, keep the interaction friendly and positive while you turn down another's action or deny a flourish. Okay, the big thing about the document that we'll see is directly addressing inappropriate behavior. When, as a club leader or a caller, you have someone who's and have been had complaints about is acting inappropriately, politely but firmly advise them that you believe the behavior is inappropriate, and that they need to stop. I belong to the kind of knock it off philosophy of dealing with people. The first time you need someone to stop behaving a certain way, you just quietly and away from everyone else say, you really need to knock this off. It's hurting people. It's offending people. And what you find is sometimes that individual does not realize that his or her behavior is offending others. And in many cases, they'll just resolve it right then and there, and you can go on. There is an option if you choose not to address the issue with a person to file a report, which we'll talk about what that option involves later on. So now a quick walk through the document. Bonnie, do you want to bring up the document? Are there any questions at this point? I don't see anything on the chat.
Yep. I'm just trying to go to the other documents, so.
Okay.
Okay, we should be there, Harlan.
Okay. There it is. So this is the document that CALLERLAB created that takes everything I just talked about and puts it into a utilitarian form for clubs to use. And if you'll scroll down just a little bit, there are 4 parts to the document.
Sorry, give me just a minute. I'm not seeing it on the presentation screen.
Okay.
So.
We had it announced.
Well, let me.
On the screen that's up now, it's the first document.
Yep, I'm just trying to.
Okay.
Oh, come on. I'm sorry, everyone. Oh, come on. Where did it go? I don't know why all of a sudden I'm. Okay, so now.
Okay, there are 4, it looks like a sections to the document. One is it lists the goals of the document, which we've talked about, which has to do with creating a safe and secure dance environment. And now it's not there.
Oh.
It's the 3rd one down on the right hand side.
You got it
Okay,
now?
so yes, I've got it. So first is the first page has to do with the handbook goals and why it was created. The second section, the B section, is a handbook that discusses all the issues for dancers, what they should be aware of, what appropriate dance behavior is, what defensive dancing is, and how to create it. The third section, the C section, is the handbook for club leadership and callers. And then the final section, the D section, is guidelines for organizations for dealing with inappropriate behavior. Okay, so let's go to the next page. And this is pretty much what we've talked about so far. This is the history of why we developed and this is a whole handbook for you to have that both as dance leaders and to share with your club members. So this covers all the philosophy behind it, and we can keep going down.
Okay, and I just want to say shortly after the webinar, probably early next week, the PowerPoint and this document will be available on the USDA website.
Okay, so you can keep scrolling down because this is basically things we've talked about of why it is there. So again, here's the first big section after the goals of the handbook. This is something for you to give to your dancers. It talks about appropriate behavior. It talks about expectations. It talks about being aware. It talks about styling and gentle hands. It talks about what's appropriate. And these are just guidelines for you to share with your dancers to make sure they're aware of it. And we'll go on down. The next part of the dancer section is what I talked about. This gives very specific things about defensive dancing. It has a section on handling swings, flourishes, physical contact, handholds, and being understanding and how to avoid being hurt while you're dancing by people who might be a little overly rough or mainly overly excited about flourishes and swinging. And then it has just a summary of the philosophy behind helping create a welcoming dance environment. Again, this whole section here, always something to share with your dancers that they should be aware of. And that way, when any issue comes up, it's not something they've not been informed of. Let's go on to the next section. This section is really important for you to share with your club leadership and with your caller, because although every caller, when they pay their annual dues to CALLERLAB, signs off on the code of ethics, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've thoroughly read that section 5 on what their commitment is here. So this talks about what people as dance leaders like yourselves and what callers can do to help create and maintain a safe and secure dance environment. And if you go down a little bit, this section right here is specifically coming up is for callers. Get a little bit further down. Yeah, so this is to make sure that callers know what harassment is and dance leaders know what harassment is. And basically the things we've talked about. So this provides all the definitions that you need to know. And we've gone over this, so but just clarifies if you need a definition of bullying. And here's the big part, just go right after this is the part on caller awareness that you should share with your caller. Callers should be aware that when they're calling and teaching to enhance awareness on the topics included above, learn and recognize and appreciate diversity, be cautious about using calls that can result in unwanted physical contact, yellow rock, honey bear, stack the wood. Think before speaking. Be very careful what you say over the microphone. Avoid filler patter that might use words that are misinterpreted. Okay, evaluate and filter all personal interactions with dancers to avoid comments and physical contact that may be interpreted as harassment or sexual harassment, and maintain college and vigilance. So this whole section is something every caller should be aware of, and you should share with your callers. And this section again applies to callers and dancers, but particularly to callers about as they're teaching calls, also teaching about appropriate behavior. Okay, and we can go on. Okay, the next section is guidelines for dealing with inappropriate. So if you as dance leaders and club leadership have situations where you really have to deal with something that's more than just correctional, so that's what this is defined. So if we keep going down, it's a couple blank pages, and then so the first part is a form so that it gives the club policy. It gives the policy we've been taking, and you can just fill in your club information here. And then if you go down just a hair more, it gives a summary of the philosophy behind a safe and secure dance environment. And we encourage clubs to use this or modify it to fit their needs as should be. Okay, and so this is the introduction, and this talks about addressing inappropriate behavior and that it needs to be addressed firmly and directly. And I'm going to talk about how to do that in a little bit. And if a report needs to be made of an incident, if someone comes to you and complains about, say, sexual harassment by one of you, we provide all the information on how to make a report, and then it goes on after how to make a report, and then it provides the forms for doing that. So this is the procedure we would like to encourage clubs to use when they have a report to figure out, to submit, and then the final thing we provide them is a form for doing that. So when you get a complaint, you can go to this form. And you can fill out all the name of the person giving complaint, and all the contact information, what happened, where it happened, were there witnesses, then a detailed description, and does the complainant want to file a report with authorities? And this will give you all the documentation you need to legally protect yourselves for handling a report. And we can go down a little more. So that's for filling out the report. And this is the important part. The second part of the form is what action did you take, and was the complaint resolved, and when? So this gives you a full way of documenting any complaint you do have. I want to go back though and say 90% or more of the complaints you can get are not going to take a report. It's going to take a simple knock it off kind of approach. Is you need to stop this, and it goes in degrees. There are simple things that you fix really easy, and then complex things that really take a report. For instance, if I had a situation that I like to use for this, which is a simple thing. There was a dancer in one of my groups who on the breaks would go to the snack table, and then on his way back to the square would stop at the sink that was on the side of the hall and take out his dentures and rinse them, and then put them back in. And the complaint was not that he rinsed his dentures so much, but that he didn't wash his hands afterwards. And it was simply a matter of taking, hey buddy, let me take you aside and tell you, why don't you rinse your dentures in the bathroom and be sure to wash them afterwards? That way it's a little more private for you, and it's not something that the other dancers will find distasteful, as opposed to a dancer who, you know, more than one woman dancer came up to me and said, whenever so and so swings me, he puts his hand way too low on my back. And it's like, you know, that took, you know, a more serious thought. Had that continued, it would have probably gone to the point of having you. So you have to look at degree. And like I said, 90% of the things it's going to be, hey, you know, you need to knock this off. It's a minor thing like rinsing your dentures, but some of them are big things. And this form and the process described in this form are something for you to use in case of the big things. So any questions? My recommendation is that you download this document. You discuss it with the leadership of your group, decide if you want to use it, decide how you want to distribute it to club members, or if you have any questions or support you need around it. I am always available to do that. So is Dottie Welch. So basically, again, what our goal is to make callers, dance leaders, and dancers aware of the fact that we have to keep our activities safe, inviting, and welcoming, and a place where everyone can have fun without worrying about being hurt or having something unwelcome happen to them. So any questions?
I don't have a question, but I want to do a little tie-in. It's not so much a sexual harassment, but it filters back to your discussion on communication. I've had an incident where I got a really bad infection on my arm and I missed 2 nights of dancing. I dance with a small group, and so, you know, we kind of need everybody. So when I did go back to dancing, I'm still experiencing even a very gentle touch or nudge breaks the skin on my arm and I start to bleed. So the first night I was back, I made sure that everybody in the club knew what was going on, and, you know, more for be careful, but just if something happened. Well, the next week when we were dancing on a pass-through kind of motion, one of the guys' hands hit my arm and I felt a poke, and I looked down and I'm instantly bleeding all over everything. So, you know, I had to stop the square, get somebody in, but it's that awareness that if something happens, because we're so sensitive about somebody walking out of a square, or you don't want to dance with me, or whatever the situation is, you know, having people in the group aware, we instantly got somebody in, we instantly got first aid, you know, and we resolved. So I think, you know, the older we get and the more we have stuff going on, the more we need to communicate what's happening with us. And so I think not only the harassment, but some people would take it as offensive if I walked out of their square, you know, if they don't know why I'm walking out.
And one of the points I think back earlier is, among the other things people need to be aware of is the ability to communicate. My right arm is sore tonight. Please don't take it. Or, you know,
Right.
my right arm could bleed tonight. Please avoid it. And so communication is a big part
Of all that we do. Does anybody else have any other comments or discussions?
Well, this is all something we weren't aware of, but it's very helpful for all of us, I think. And I mean, we don't utilize the CALLERLAB resources as dancers. We don't use the CALLERLAB resources as much as we should. And this made us more aware. So certainly appreciate it from that perspective. And I'm anxious to get the handbook, as it's a very helpful document.
I was going to say, Jim, what do you think about me posting it out to the council email?
Absolutely. Sure.
And that's really why I wanted to bring, I know that some people said, oh, we don't have any kind of harassment issues in our club. Contrary to popular belief, virtually every club has some level of harassment, and the challenge gets into who handles it. Do we make the caller do it? Do we have a club leader that does it? And does it go on because nobody will take the responsibility? And I think that's a discussion that people need to have with their clubs, which is, if we have situations, who does the talking? Who does the, deals with the situation? Is it a joint effort? Is it, so I think they're all very, very good points. And I do thank you, Harlan, for taking the time today to come and share this with us.
The big thing is, and again, this is kind of a fast overview in some way, is to really sit down and read through the booklet in detail, because it does things like, okay, if it's a caller-ran club, whose responsibility is it to deal with it? If it's a board-ran club, whose responsibility is it? And really clarifying. That's why there's particular space on the form at the end to clarify who's responsible. And I think Bonnie's right. There are people who say, this is not a big issue, but I have never been in a club. I've been dancing for 40 years and calling for 36, where there hasn't been an incident somewhere or another and it's not all harassment, where there's incidents of people being hurt because they're swung too hard, people getting yellow rocks when they don't want yellow rocks, are people being a whole wide range from minor things to fairly serious things approached in a sexually inappropriate fashion. And it's better to have a plan and know who's going to deal with it and how to deal with it. And this document tries to be as clear as possible on all those things, and give you a point of reference.
Well, and we just had an incident, in essence, a stalking incident at one of our festivals. And apparently this person has done it at several other places. We were able to contain it and handle it because we were made aware of it. But we also communicated, we tried to make sure that other than the key people who handled the incident, we tried to make sure that nobody else really knew about it. But we did communicate with other event chairmen, because we know that he had been, in essence, banned from their events for this reason. So whatever you do, you need to be as discretionary as you can, yet communicate with the right people so that they can watch for similar, we didn't do like a broadcast to every festival organizer, but we knew, some similar to ours that we were able to communicate with and say, this person's been asked to, watch for a similar situation. So, it's a fine line to cross. It really is.
Okay. Just something else I want to point out too is communicating with your callers. So, because there is that whole section about callers' responsibility and the background knowledge a caller should have in these areas, and making sure that they're aware of it. Because this is a relatively new document, and it's been out there. And there is the one section number 5 of the Code of Ethics, which talks about it, but not every caller has had a chance to look at this document in full and read through it. So I would share it with your callers as well.
Any other comments or questions for Harlan?
Sure. I just want to say that I'm very, very happy to see both the update to the Code of Ethics and this set of documentation. Harlan and CALLERLAB are really to be applauded for the amount of work they put in on this. I think my one question is, do you have a sense of how much uptake you've had in terms of the policies being adopted by regional or state or local associations or clubs?
That's a really good question. We've been trying to publicize it as much as possible. I'm hoping that having it up after today, it'll get more publicized to make clubs across the country aware of it. I know that for the most part, because it's a relatively new document, that it's been kind of dependent on which callers are promoting it. I've promoted it amongst all my clubs. I think a number of members of the Board of Governors have also done it. I would like to point out, and in looking at this document and talking about it with other callers, one of the things, just because of the kind of research I do in my former life, and is the difference between female callers have really embraced this document a lot more than male callers, and I think it's because their experience is different. And I think the same would be that, you know, it's hard, you know, the section on defensive dancing, I tried to put together in a way that would apply to any dancer, but I find that the people who need to use defensive dancing the most are female dancers.
And to follow up on your question, Nick, I've been around square dancing for a lot of years, and I've been involved on, you know, various levels. I was not aware of this document, and I didn't hear about it until I attended the CALLERLAB convention. And like so many dancers, I think that the CALLERLAB convention is only for callers. And boy, did I get a real education. They embrace and welcome dance leaders to attend. And there are so many documents available. I've tried to highlight some of them in this webinar series, and I've got more that are coming. Programs that I learned about by attending the CALLERLAB convention this last spring. So definitely, our last program, Jack Plattis talked about a lot of the CALLERLAB marketing programs and information that was available, and that is available free of charge to all of our dance clubs and organizations. So take the time to go out and visit the CALLERLAB website and just spend some time and browse it and see all of the stuff that is available to us as dancers, as well as to the callers. I think, you know, part of this, all of us working together, is going to help spread the word about some of these things.
One thing I'd like to point out is this is a relatively new document. It was, it's just a year old, a little over a year old now. And so it's still fresh and getting out, but we've had at CALLERLAB convention, we've had presentations on it both of the past 2 years. And I'd like to see some sort of presentation on it incorporated as part of nationals, possibly. The other thing about CALLERLAB, there is a section on the CALLERLAB website called the CALLERLAB Knowledge Base. It has literally thousands and thousands of articles of interest to callers and dancers that are available free to everyone. It has an amazing amount of free information. And it's knowledge at CALLERLAB.org. Let me just look up the address for sure. But the CALLERLAB database is an incredible resource for all dancers and callers. It's knowledge.callerlab.org.
Sometimes. Are we muted? We should be.
No, you're not muted. You said it was knowledge.callerlab.org. I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah.
And Harlan, we will talk because I'm chair of education for the Shreveport convention. So
okay, good. Any other questions or comments?
We have some latecomers. I'm sorry you missed most of the presentation, but we're glad to have you here. Have you got any questions that you can think of that we can maybe refer back to?
We're glad to be here. We were having trouble logging on. So sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about
But we're
that.
here.
Anything come to mind to you specifically, Jerry
No.
or Donna?
Not really, no.
How about you, Karen? Have you had any specific incidences in your area?
So sorry that I missed most of it, but no problems that I'm aware of regarding what I think your topic is.
Well, we'll have it up on the USDA website probably early next week, and we're definitely gonna share the harassment document to the council's email group, so you'll have that. Plus, it'll be available on the USDA website. So I think it's that'll catch you up on a lot of things, Karen.
I think so, and I look forward to listening to all of it. Thank you, Harlan and Bonnie.
Okay, good to see you again, Karen.
And you
Okay.
too.
Bonnie, I really appreciate that you're going to put it up on the USDA website, because I think that will really help in getting it much more attention.
I hope so. I hope so. Dan is really good about getting stuff up fairly quickly. It's just me getting it over to him to upload for us. So I'll get to that this weekend. So, all right. Anybody else have any other questions or comments for Harlan? Then I want to sincerely thank Harlan. He's enjoying a family reunion in Cape Cod. So I appreciate you taking the time out to do this for us today. I wish we had more people, but I think it's going to get a lot more traction. As I said, we're competing against a lot of events right now. So that's a good thing. That means we're back dancing on the dance floor. But I thank those of you that participated today and for joining us. And if you have any questions, let us know afterwards and I can forward them on to Harlan if we need it. All right. And I did post that
Thank you.
knowledge database on the chat if you want to grab that before we shut down the webinar. All right.
And aside from, if anyone has any questions or comments they have for me later on, my email is harlankerr46@gmail.com. So Harlan Kerr 46@gmail.com. Now you know the year I was born. Anyway, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it, because it's important to me to get information on this document out, and thank you for being so receptive.
All right. Thank you so much. I have posted Harlan's email address on the chat again. So if any of you want to grab that before we close this off.
Bonnie, I'm
Yes?
sorry, you put Harlan Kerr 45, not 46.
Ah. See, that's just me and my clumsy fingers.
Okay.
So ignore the 45
thank
and
you.
just do the 46. All right. Thank you all so very much.
Okay.
You have a wonderful rest of your weekend and happy dancing wherever you're going.
And thank
Okay.
you, Bonnie, for doing this.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you. We're more indebted to you for sharing your knowledge and information. So
Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
thanks. You too. I'm going to stop the